there's two sides to the coin. There is a thing where people are getting more sensitive about everything, where it's like, hey, you can't say that, and actually, yeah, I mean, they're right about saying that. But I think the part that it goes too far is instead of just saying, yeah, you shouldn't say that, I'm offended, then they go on to say, I'm going to cancel you forever now, and not even, for example, there's someone I know someone once said years ago that they had a racist thought once. To this day, they're like, white person's a racist. It's like, well, they said something that you didn't like years ago. Why are you...
See, that characterization of, they said something you didn't like, is, you often get that from conservatives. Because they'll kind of euphemistically refer to their own views as, oh, you don't like it, it's offensive, it's too real for you. Like, no. And then also the idea of sensitivity, because that has a double meaning too. On the one hand, it could just mean I'm too fragile, right? I break or get upset when I ought not to. But then on the other hand, sensitivity has a positive connotation, right? If our instruments are more sensitive, if your camera is more sensitive to light, for instance, it sees more. And I think that our moral theories have gotten better over time, and we're more sensitive because we can see more moral phenomena.
The thing about the camera is the fact that it is more sensitive. If there's too much light, the image becomes overblown. You actually lose some of the visual information, which is why a lot of the cameras now have histograms to show light levels, so you don't lose pixels.
Right. I don't think there's any equivalent of that with moral phenomena. Or maybe you think that...
But I think that's where the snowflake comes in, where it's like, okay, I made a mistake, and instead of just letting me apologize for it, you're going to say, you can say, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, and then the person says, well, sorry is not good enough, you're going to be canceled forever now because of something you said on Twitter 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they could and they could have even came out years later and said, yeah, I said a lot of stupid stuff back then. A lot of books were published back then as well, that people were just now rediscovering. I think maybe the offense, I think the reaction should probably match the level of the offense.
Yeah, definitely.
So like maybe saying something off color, maybe canceled for a few months. You murder a bunch of Jews,
Good God.
probably the death penalty, and then canceled forever, and then use it as a butt of a joke for many things.
So I guess I'm not really familiar enough with particular cases, right? So I sort of remember Dave Chappelle, was it? Mm-hmm. And I found it really boring because there wasn't a lot of explanation happening. I think we've got to explain what's wrong with the things that people are saying if we want them to change their minds. And often, the Twitter mobs come out and there's no, maybe there is explanation, but what's really doing the changing of people's minds is coercion. And that's not helpful. The other thing is that also, it brings about change that is never actually acknowledged. Everyone was so goddamn racist in the 90s, where I grew up. And it just kind of fizzled out, and people stopped being racist, even started condemning racism, homophobia too, without ever really acknowledging that change happened. So when Donald Trump was elected, I remember maybe it was like one of his victory speech. He says, we're going to protect our LGBTQ allies from the evil Muslims. And he got a lot of applause from an audience that probably was responsible for a lot of homophobic bigotry. And it was just this kind of Orwellian moment of, we've always supported these people. It's quite frightening.
There's two ways of looking at a problem. You can be unfamiliar with it, or you can be completely ignorant of it. What exactly is the difference between not knowing it and then being ignorant of it?
Well, if you're unfamiliar, you don't have the facts, but you're sort of open to the facts. If you're ignorant, you don't really want to know the facts. You don't want to change your mind. you're incurious and probably wrong too. Because I think,
like willfully ignorant.
yeah, I think ignorance is more willful, and I think there's not really that much to be said about this distinction, except to notice that there's a kind of relationship between them. Because I think, you know, a lot of people, especially if they're from small towns like where I grew up, never really, they're unfamiliar with the virtues of, say, curiosity, for instance. And so the unfamiliarity kind of feeds ignorance, because they never see knowledge ever getting anyone anywhere. And so, you know, the one is fed by the other.
All right. So in a way, being unfamiliar, and then someone could say, okay, well, this is the facts, and they go, oh, I did not know that. Whereas an ignorance would be more of, I'm still not going to believe you.
Yeah, I mean, you could even say that that's not just ignorance, but it's intransigence. Whereas an ignorant person, it might not be such that they refuse to change their mind, but they just don't even care also.
Or perhaps ignorance prevents them from changing their mind on other things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the facts about one thing, but like an ignorance of a fact from something else completely unrelated may actually affect their opinions.